Welcome to the Almighty AI Podcast. And this week, Mariah, I have something that I want you to think about. I listened to a podcast, a few different ones really, and they talked about Wikipedia a lot.
Ooh.
And essentially, Wikipedia has this problem, and I'm going to explain the problem that Wikipedia has, and then I want to discuss kind of our angle on it or whatever. And that is, Wikipedia is basically made by humans essentially voluntarily constantly correcting.
Right.
So I don't know about your use for Wikipedia, but Wikipedia came out when I was still in school, maybe even in high school, can't remember, high school or college, but I was still writing papers at a not academic level. I'll just say that. I wasn't writing master's level papers at that point.
Wikipedia is always a great place to start.
And we were absolutely told not to use
Yep,
Wikipedia.
we
It
were
was
too.
totally bad. You can't use it. Okay, so that didn't change since you
Yeah.
came. But let's be honest. When you want to look something up real quick,
I go to Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is great, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very good. I'm not saying it's 100%, but like if I just wanted to, quickly learn like, when did Abraham Lincoln die or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be wrong, I guess,
It's
but
really good for biographies, like just like little snapshots of people's lives, just to read really quick or whatever.
and you may have seen documentaries of people, and there's one guy that I watched a special little, I don't know if you call it a documentary, a news segment or whatever on. It's like his main entertainment. I think he has another job, but he spends in copious amounts of hours editing Wikipedia, and he sees it as like his dedication to society and whatnot.
Wow.
So when they train these large language models, and the way this interacts with Wikipedia, well, what do you think is a really good source to train the large language model if you just want to be able to sit down and type into Bard or type into ChatGPT, tell me whatever information, and Wikipedia is like amazing. As a matter of fact, how good would the large language models be without Wikipedia to ingest? Now they ingest a lot of other stuff too, but it seems like Wikipedia is this really good source of information. So the problem they're going to have with Wikipedia is a couple things. One of these doesn't really pertain to what I want to talk about, but their financial model is going to be difficult because they live on donations.
Wikipedia does.
And so if you never really go to Wikipedia anymore because you're using an LLM to basically just summarize what Wikipedia says, and a lot of times in a better way, right? You might ask a question and it'll pull from one Wikipedia article and then you ask it the follow-up question and that results in a different Wikipedia article. And so these large language models can be just so fantastic, but they keep you from actually going to a separate site.
Yes.
So are people going to be as likely to donate to Wikipedia? Is their site traffic going to go down? That's sort of a problem that they have. But that's not really the interesting problem that I want to talk about today. Another problem that they have is now the people that write Wikipedia articles, it is extremely easy for them to just ask a large language model to write the article for them.
So it's becoming like one and the same.
It's this loop.
Yeah, it's a circle.
So if the large language models are going to get better, you can't have the large language models training on itself, essentially.
Right.
So if too much content in the internet becomes large language model generated, the large language model then trains on itself, and that's not probably going to improve it and make it better.
Yeah.
And
that's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
That's really weird.
So anyway, that's sort of a problem for the large language model people, how they're going to solve this problem. So where I want us to jump in, though, is we've probably talked a little bit about, I certainly know I've talked about it, informally, and I'm guessing it's come up on the podcast, saying things like, where does these large language models get their information? So I've kind of explained that they just get it from all over the place, that, there's not, I tried to argue that they don't even know what it's going to answer and why, right? They're just ingesting a whole bunch of information. But we've kind of talked about are there going to be Christian sources of information and so on and so forth? So if you ask it some sort of moral question, like, is it okay to lie? There's probably not a uniform view on when lying's okay and when it's not okay, and so on and so forth. So you say, well, is it going to give a non-Christian, view of this or whatever?
So, kind of similar. I've been doing some like, tell me all the facts about, like, this person, or tell me all the facts about this person, and, like, have them give me a summary. And I found that it tends to be sort of, with the last couple of people I've tried, instead of being like, well, some people say this about this person, some people say this about this person. So there's this one particular pastor that his son and some of the deacons in, like, South Korea, it was like South Korea. He's South Korean. So I didn't know a ton about his life, so, like, I wanted to, get a quick snapshot of it. And so, but I knew enough to know, like, something is, like, not quite right here, because it said that he went to jail for 3 years for, like, fraud. And so I went back and I was looking, and it looks like he put his son in charge of something, which he should have never done, and his son stole a bunch of money, and he went to jail for fraud. So with the large language model, though, it was interesting, because if I would have just stopped there, I would have thought that he stole a bunch of money from the church.
So did the guy you're talking about actually go to jail, or only the son went to jail?
No, the guy actually went to jail because his son was under him, but he didn't actually ever see any money. It was just his son took it.
So it was, like, technically right that the reason he went to jail was for fraud, but it didn't give you enough context to realize his role in the fraud, meaning, like, he was the head of the organization that allowed the fraud or whatever, and so, yes, he was culpable.
Yeah.
Courts found him culpable, but he wasn't the person directly taking the money.
Yeah, and then the other thing is like, it didn't really say it was, like, controversial or not. So then, like, the other one I pulled up, some churches like him, some churches don't. But it just kind of gave me one side instead of the other side. So I was like, this is interesting, just because, not that it's wrong, it's just interesting which side it picked.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, so the people that made that LLM probably don't even know who that Korean pastor is. So they didn't actually, but it is very interesting. And so I started thinking to myself, okay, well, we think about this, like, what might Christians have to offer, or Christianity have to offer to this? And it's like, I started thinking, like, well, we would want to make sure the large language models also took in Christian sources, at least, right?
Yeah.
At least, at the very, I understand why they're not only going to do that. I guess, we talked another time about having a Christian-only large language model, whatever, but I think we ended up deciding that might not work. But we just thought, we at least figure, well, we probably want Christian sources to be ingested as well. And then I started thinking about, what are the Christian sources that I want it to read? So I could think of theology like crazy. I mean, there's an infinite amount of theology.
So, that would cause so much fighting with God. That'd be like the Book of Mormon. And we'd be like, no.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do want it to have read the Book of Mormon, because if I ask it, if I'm writing a sermon and I want it to tell me about the Book of Mormon, I do want it to read it. But if I want to know a Christian source about Abraham Lincoln dying, I mean, it's like, what are Christian sources? What would I even consider a Christian source? And I'm thinking, so I go to Wikipedia for just a ton of things. And I'm not talking about really important things, life-changing things, I'm basing my whole worldview on this or anything, but, like, we use Wikipedia all the time, right? I mean, who we kidding here? And so it's like, well, what Christian sources would I want to do in order to balance that? And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like getting, like, depressed is an overly strong word, but I'm like, does Christianity even just put out anything? Because this is what I'm thinking I can think of. I can think of theology, and I can think of politics. I could think of creationism, which you can call that theology if you want, but, creation science or whatever, And then I'm, like, running out of stuff that's not in those buckets.
Well, I think, like, there would be a lot of kids material. I don't know, like, what you would call, but, like, little kids books, kids education, school. And
most of the
curriculum.
But the way those curriculum are written, unless it's about theology, politics, or evolution, are probably just taken pretty much right from the secular sources. They don't do any original research on any of that, right?
Well, I mean, it depends on which curriculum, and then, like, if it's Bible-based or not. So, 'cause some of it is just private, but some of it is Bible-based. So, like, your English will have excerpts from different, like, philosophy.
Yeah, I grew up using Bible-based curriculum, but it it was really apparent in the science stuff. All about all anything related to evolution. All the curriculum I used was against evolution. But as far as like how the laws of thermodynamics or whatever, we were pulling all that from secular sources. Now the book itself was not secular, right? It was a Becca or whatever one we used. I don't know, but and I'm trying to think. Okay, so if I wanted a particular Christian Wikipedia, for a lack of a better word, I know that's not probably a great explanation. If I wanted to sort of a Christian thing, it's like I just don't know where the original ideas are coming from.
When you say original ideas, like Wikipedia is supposed to be kind of fact, right? Like there's not.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but obviously, if they're going to write an article about about LGBTQ, or they're going to write an article about something, their
view or whatever is going to be mixed in with it.
If they are able to write a really long article, maybe they could say the Christians think this and the Catholics think this. And
so basically, you're kind of asking if there's like enough Christians in pop culture.
Yeah, in almost any cult, like anything outside of politics, theology, and evolution.
Yeah.
And this is another question, just because I've been thinking about it a lot longer than you have. I've kind of thrown this on you. Is it like that's the way it should be, and Christians should just do Wikipedia?
I see.
Christians should just engage in all these other things where we get our information. They should just help write the encyclopedia, if we still use those. They should just help write the history books. Or should I be depressed that there aren't more separate things? How should we think about it?
That's interesting. So that's hard because, like, one of the things you're talking about is, like, integrity. Like, obviously, the reason why we'd want to go to a source that is just from Christians is because, like, the integrity, morals, ethics, peace. However, the other thing we're talking about is, like, knowledge and, like, being smart. And those two things don't always go together.
Right.
However, like, there's some really smart Nazis, so it's not like you want to listen to just smart people either. So I would say, like, I would maybe prefer both instead of just one or the other, like having both is kind of nice because kind of like focus on the family. Like I used to like focus on a family for like movie reviews and be like, can I watch this movie with my parents?
Sure.
And it would be like, no, don't. And I'd be like, okay. And that was kind of just like a Christian only source. However, I can't use it for everything. So
like if you wanted, maybe this is a bad example and I'm just kind of searching around, but if you wanted to say who developed the James Webb telescope, maybe there were Christians on that crew that developed it. I have no idea, and they probably shouldn't be running around yelling about it necessarily, right? But if I want to learn about it, and I really wanted to get down to the source material, I'm not talking about someone writing an article about it. But if I really wanted to say who are the people that really know how it works and know how to do it and help develop it, I'm gonna, I'll go talk to the people that developed it or whatever, that explaining how to do it. They're not going to be Christian. Those are all going to be what we consider secular things, right?
Yeah, so in that point, it's like, well, would I rather have a primary source write the article, or would I rather have, like, a Christian write the article about somebody else? Like, I think you kind of need both, because you need those primary sources. Like, you want to be able to go interview them and get that primary source, but at the same time, maybe you want a Christian's perspective about them or about the project. I think you kind of need both. I think that a Christian's only source would be helpful for, like, certain things. So, like, one thing that happens a lot within, like, denominations or the church is, like, somebody will die. Like, a pastor or a big public figure within the church will die, and then all of a sudden after they die, it's like, oh, like, this person was actually a bad person, and we found this, this, and this, and then they kind of, like, smear them. But it's like they never did it while they were alive. They just waited until they died, and that person couldn't speak for themselves. So having a place where, like, Christians could go and kind of like talk about these people would be kind of neat from a non-bias point of view. But that probably wouldn't happen either.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's like, okay, so the way that you would talk to the people that develop a James Webb Telescope without getting an interview, because they're not going to give you an interview probably. So the way you would interact with them without actually giving them an interview. Some of them will never give an interview to anybody because they hate talking in front of people or whatever, right? They're not going to talk to you. Is you read the papers that they wrote. You read their academic papers.
Right.
And those are very hard to read. I understand, they're like, some of them maybe you and I wouldn't even be capable of ingesting probably without an insane amount of work.
We want to read them.
Yeah, and we'd have to like go get a degree in whatever in order to like understand all the words, or we'd be looking up every single word as we went along. But that's how you would interact with the source material. And so sure, a Christian organization could create a Christian news thing. But you say, well, who's creating the primary source material? So you could have a Christian news station go interview the James Webb people. I'm not even sure we do, do we even do that? Like, I think of like, my dad listens to a podcast and I've listened to it too. He's the president of one of the seminaries. He does a podcast. But he just reads an article from the newspaper and then he talks about it. I'm being a little unfair, but that's like a big part of what he does. And I'm like,
that was
well, I can read that article.
Yeah. So CBS, have you ever seen CBS? It's Christian Broadcasting Station or whatever.
Yeah, I've never had cable, so I know what you're talking about, but I've never watched it in any kind of like, I suppose it's on the internet now if I really wanted it, huh?
Appears to me, from YouTube, it appears to me that like as a Christian broadcast station, they do talk about like what the regular news talks about, but they try to focus on like persecuted Christians in different countries, also like the Israel-Palestinian conflict. They focus a lot on that. And then that, like, it seems to be more global, and they seem to leave like national level politics kind of out of it, from what I've seen.
Because I'm arguing there's just so many subjects that aren't politics,
right?
But just so many. I don't consume a lot of Prague University or whatever. Aren't they just politics? Like a lot of what they do is politics. Everything I've ever seen, I would consider political.
Dennis Prager is. I do not like Dennis Prager.
Yeah, so
I do not advocate for Dennis Prager.
So I don't
do not like him.
I don't advocate or not advocate. I haven't consumed enough of their content, but what I have seen, it was like, no, this is big political thing, and I'm like, there's just a lot of things like how you clean a carpet. Like you're not going to find a Christian source on how to clean a carpet.
Dennis Prager has really bad views on women.
Oh, is that why you don't like it?
He said that.
I'm really getting off on
but they need to know.
Okay.
They need to know. He said that basically a wife should thank her husband for not cheating on him, because like that is men are prone to cheat on their wives. So that is like the bare minimum is we should thank them for not cheating.
So men are naturally sinful. They naturally sin. So what are the women's sins that the men should be thanking their wives for not doing?
I don't know. It was horrible. And then his view on porn is really bad too. It was basically like you should just consume it. That way guys don't cheat on you. So like if guys watch porn, they won't cheat on you. So just let them. I was like, you suck. I hate you.
Well, let's just pretend an imaginary news source that, so the podcast I'm thinking of my dad, as far as I can tell, the guy's fine. I don't dislike him. It's just, he's just reading something from The Guardian or whatever.
Right. It's not very authentic.
He's not doing original research. And within theology, Christians do original research all the time. Like, I would consider what I wrote for my dissertation like pretty base level original research. Like, do I do that all the time now as a pastor? No, because no one will read it.
Because it's not
no
fun.
one in my church cares. But I am capable of doing it and have done it. And there are lots of people like me doing it. And there are lots of people much better at it than me doing it all the time. And they're a career at it. And then, of course, we have some who seem to be especially gifted at it, especially the language is you are gifted if you have not just the ability but the desire to keep working on those. So it just I don't know. I thought about this a lot. I started leaning toward, well, maybe Christians just need to just go work on the James Webb Telescope themselves and with the other non-Christians or whoever religious people are there, and that's the solution. And trying to create some sort of alternate reality, that's a little harsh, but a sort of subset of things that's all Christian. It's like, well, the only things that I remember when I was in Christian school or whatever, it was evolution, politics, and theology.
Right.
Like that. I mean, I think that was it. And it's like, and maybe that's okay. Obviously, theology is totally appropriate. I don't think that that's incorrect. We Christians should be doing lots of theology, and I think that's wonderful.
I think, though, that we really do have to get into culture more. I think that's probably one of our biggest mistakes, is that, like, Christians they'll really stay in the church, or they'll really go overseas. But then as far as, like, our national level culture, especially in today's society where it's really easy to, like, be canceled or to, like, be kind of looked down on because you are saying, I mean, how weird would it be, like, if I just, like, went to Walmart and then just, like, started talking about Jesus? Like, that would be so weird. It would make so many people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But I'm not saying you have to do it like that. But what I'm saying is like, it's become weird to, like, talk about God in culture. But I think that's exactly where we're supposed to be. And I think that at this point, like, in a loving, respectful way, we have to kind of embrace that awkwardness. Because culture flows over, and it flows over in politics, it flows over in science, it flows over in the arts. And if we just stop, because culture is people, so if we just stop it, then it's not gonna trickle over. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll lose.
And I also think that something that my high school did that I think was a mistake was they kind of said these secular things are bad because they're secular. Mm-hmm. And how to clean a carpet, why we didn't go to that details. It's just I got the general impression. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Secular stuff's bad. So obviously no one talked about cleaning carpets.
What kind? Like movies, entertainment.
And even secular science was bad. Non-Christians in media, non-Christians in just almost anything that was non-Christian, right? Like. So yes, my dad was a CPA, but he was a Christian guy, so it was great. But that was still some sort of secular thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and maybe the physical things were more popular, like building buildings or something was like seen as more good. But it just seemed like anything that wasn't with your hands, and these are impressions, right? No one sat down and laid this out, right?
You just get it.
I got the impression, right, that these were bad. So like for me to say, who was good at math, and I assume would have been pretty good at science, so my high school science program wasn't super good. I was good at what we had. I had one teacher that I feel like did a fine job, but I almost thought I was choosing an immoral path if I would have said I want to work on the James Webb Telescope.
I think that's weird.
I want to become a chemist that's going to create the next great sticky material that we're going to make the next great type of tape.
Yeah.
Like I almost saw that as like bad, and it's like, okay, well, we have these large language models that are going to train on all the different kinds of tape.
Right.
And if I want the Christian view on that, I don't think I want to create a Christian college that makes tape, or that has chemists that are going to design the next tape, and we have an alternate universe. I think we're just going to have to say, no, Christians need to be in the world, not of the world. And maybe we're so afraid our kids are going to get involved in immoral sexual sins or any other things else, we drive that in ourselves so much that then we're sort of afraid of everything, and then maybe we're not inserting ourselves into these other things enough. I don't know. I'm sort of spitballing here.
Yeah, no, like I would agree. I never had that experience at the school that I went to, the Christian school I went to, but I've had family members who have kind of held the same mentality that, like, if you're not a preacher or a missionary or in the church, then, like, what are you doing? But the thing is like, so your dad, for example, an accountant, like, if you're, like, let's say Christian guys like your dad, they weren't accountants, then all of a sudden our only options are secular accountants. So they might be nice people, but one, like, if somebody holds the title of a Christian accountant, like, I'm going to trust them more. That doesn't always work, but hypothetically, you should be able to, right? And then also, it's like, I know that, if I want to talk to them about something, or, like, we can pray about something, like, it's just better. But like if you have secular accountants, they might be nice, but at the end of the day, like they're just kind of about themselves.
Well, the good thing about businesses is you can just say, well, this person's been in business for how long and how well do people like them?
Right.
So you can be fairly safe. But yeah, if you go to my dad and say, well, I want to donate my inheritance to the church, your secular accountant's going to be like, they're not going to understand.
They're
right?
not going to understand.
They're not going to understand donating money that way. I'm trying to think of what other things accountants would have to do with Christian interaction.
But also, like, as Christians, I think that it's important that we support each other. And so one way we can do this is, like, if you know Christians in certain sectors, whether it's law, accounting, whether it's a tiny market, like, going there and supporting each other, I think is really beneficial. But I mean, how are you going to support each other if everybody's just, like, at a church and they don't have jobs except for they serve in the church? Like, I mean, think about it. Where would the tithe money come from? Where would we get our paychecks? Like, there would be no cash flow of anything because nobody would be doing anything.
Right. So, so it sounds like what we're coalescing on here is Christians, obviously I'm for people becoming pastors, and it's not like we have too many of those, especially in small towns that need bivocational pastors, like a massive shortage of those. So I'm not saying we don't want pastors, and I'm sure your parents could talk about all the places that probably need some missionaries and all that.
Right.
But for those that aren't called to do that, or don't feel like that's what the Lord wants them to do, avoiding the secular world or something maybe is a mistake, because if we think about it, it's like not actually Wikipedia, but the Christians need to be in Wikipedia. And I'm using that as a metaphor. That way, they're influencing things. You know what I'm saying?
So, okay, I just thought of this. So I think that maybe one problematic thing is that we do look at the world so much as, like, Christian secular. But I think that it's really just spiritual, right? Like, it's just a spiritual world. We're all souls. And if we divide it up too much and we think, like, these people are over here and we're over here, then we're not reaching souls, right? Like, it's basically like our spiritualness in Jesus, we need to reach these people that are basically following Satan. And if we separate ourselves, we're never going to cross that caveat ever. So I don't know. I just thought of that.
Yeah, I found this difficult situation, and a challenging thing. I think there is a balance between the whole deal, and I know Bethany had a situation, my wife Bethany, she had a situation where her upbringing really emphasized certain professions over the others, and if every church was have been like hers, everybody would have been in certain kind of professions, and it's just kind of like, then we are giving up half of Wikipedia metaphorically to Christians not having influence.
Well, and I think it's funny too, because these same people who are like, oh, like, you should do this job, or this job, then if they want to know something about something, like, let's say they want to know something in the medical field or politics, then you try to say something, they're like, well, you're not an expert. And it's like, okay, but, like, all of these experts you have now, none of them are Christians, because we never put any Christians there. So, like, we have no way to advocate for ourselves in these spots. Mm-hmm. And so they still just think that all these secular people are the experts, which sometimes they are experts, but they're experts without our best interests.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to have a seat at the table, we have to get at the table. And sometimes the way we get at the table is we've never done the work to get at the table, so we stand across the room and shoot at the people at the table, and it's like, we don't even know what we're talking about.
Right,
we literally don't know how carpet is made, yet we're yelling at the secular carpet cleaners saying they're doing it wrong, and we don't even know what they're doing hardly.
Yeah.
That's stupid. So.
And also dumb. Like it's also
stupid and dumb. Stupid and dumb. And I'm sure we've all, you and I and most of us have done some version of that at some point in our life, but it's certainly, never. Well, that's why I hang out with you, to try to get your goodness coming over this way. So, well, thanks again for joining us for the Almighty AI podcast. We'll plan on seeing you in 2-3 weeks, something like that, whenever some news comes out that we feel like what we want to address related to AI. It's an exciting time. New companies are starting, and if there's anything that we feel relates to the Christianity or Christian worldview or something we can add to the conversation, we'll bring it to you. We'll see you again.